Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for attending the session today. My name is Joshua Hostetler, and if you have not sat in on a session with me before, I am the co-chair of the AIA Technology and Architecture Practice Committee, as well as a committee member on the Central Ohio BIM User Group team. And it is my pleasure today to share that the TAP and COBUG committees have come together to co-host this event. And if you're unfamiliar with the background of this event, we sent out surveys a while back to gather the interest of the membership on various different software categories and vendors that you were all interested in. From there, we selected the top 3 and we have them before you today. Each of these vendors and service providers are going to give about a 15-minute pitch showing us the benefits of their tools or their service and try and show off why they think that we should invest in them or use them in our practice. There will be time for questions after each presentation as well. We're going to do about a 15-minute presentation and about 5 minutes of questions, and then we'll round out again at the end if there are any other follow-up questions. So our goal today for this event is really to gather a pulse on the industry for tools, processes, desires, and bring in companies who we think that can help, trying to connect the needs of you, the members, to people that can help get you what you want or what you need. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and jump in. But before we start, I want to give you a little bit of information and an introduction on the committees that are hosting the event today. So first, with AIA TAP, or Technology and Architecture Practice, TAP is one of many committees within AIA. This committee meets on the second Tuesday of the even months and really has a focus that through continuous open dialogue with the local building industry, including architects, engineers, contractors, owners, and governing agencies, that TAP can really help educate how technology impacts that building process, specifically within the architectural practice. Some of the key aspects for TAP are really just collaborating with all aspects of the building industry in matters that pertain to technology influence in today's profession, identifying opportunities and hurdles that have presented themselves through the building processes, adoption of technology and reinforcing the advantages, and identifying solutions through educating and networking of these ideas. We also want to monitor the development of computer technology and its impact on architecture practice and the entire building lifecycle. And then we also really have a focus in communicating regularly with our membership, including these topics through different various committees and reinforcing how technology can impact all aspects of the profession. And then the Central Ohio BIM User Group Committee. This is a group that is really a learning and knowledge sharing group that helps users and members develop optimal BIM workflows from the initial phases of design through managing and maintaining the building. As we all know, BIM has changed the way the built environment is designed and created. So if you have any interest, please join in the conversations and learn how you can take your BIM work to really to the next level. The COBUG group meets on the second Tuesday of the odd number months, which is the opposite of TAP, so you should be able to enjoy both if you so choose. So make sure you mark your calendars. The next event is going to be January 11th of 2022, and you can register for this event or any other events by searching COBUG on the Eventbrite site. Some other ways you can stay in touch with COBUG is through Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Slack, or all those channels, as well as there is a YouTube channel that all of the events are recorded and posted to the YouTube page. And then I would also love to shout out to our event sponsor, Imagine It with Craig. Craig, thank you for all that you do with Imagine It by supporting both of our committees and these events. It really goes a long way, so we appreciate it. Okay, we're going to go ahead and jump in. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to introduce the speakers that we have today, and then we'll go ahead and release this over to them. So starting first, I want to introduce Jared White, who is a project manager for TrueScan. Jared graduated with a degree in architecture and has since worked with hundreds of clients with various needs regarding long-range scanning and other metrology services. He uses his knowledge of architecture to ensure the models created are accurate and user-friendly. So we're excited to hear from Jared and TrueScan today. So thank you, Jared, again for being available for this event. Next, we have Phil Reed, who is the CEO at Reed Thomas. Phil is the co-founder of Reed Thomas, which is a BIM and VDC consulting company focused on connecting designers, builders, and owners through cross-discipline technology integration. Reed Thomas is proud to be the global go-to market partner of Enscape. So we're really excited to have Phil here with us today to talk about Enscape and how we can be utilizing that tool. And then last but not least, we have AP, who is a senior technical specialist with Autodesk. And AP has a focus on the AEC industry, working closely with architects, engineers, contractors, and owners to achieve their technology objectives and optimizing their workflows. AP's background is in architecture, where he worked for 8+ years in the Washington, D.C. area on projects in residential, commercial, healthcare, and U.S. Embassy design build projects worldwide. AP enjoys every aspect of design and construction and is passionate about creating collaborative project environments to ensure success. As part of Autodesk, AP has been focused on developing and articulating connected workflows associated with project design, construction, handover, and the building lifecycle. So thank you all again for being here. We're really excited to have you and hear from all of you. So the presentation order today is going to look like this. We're going to start with TrueScan, so with Jared talking about laser scanning, and then jump over to Phil with Reed Thomas to talk about Enscape, and then again AP is going to close this out with the Autodesk Construction Cloud. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Jared to go ahead and get us started talking about TrueScan and laser scanning.
We work all over the country. You can see the map there. All of the orange states that are filled in are places that we have been, and actually this is a little bit outdated. We filled in a lot of these other states here recently, but we are a group of licensed surveyors, engineers, CAD and BIM vets, and architects. So our team is unique in that we do this 100% of the time every day. When we come into work, we are working only on laser scan projects. We are separated from our competition a lot of times because there's a lot of firms that have a scanner and have a guy that knows how to do it. But this is all our team does every single day. So just to give you a little bit of an idea of how the technology works, I have this little video for you that shows a laser scanner. And you can see that it shoots out a laser and spins on 2 axes and does this at a very rapid speed. Within a couple minutes, it's picked up everything within a line of sight of it, and it's putting measured points with coordinate values on every single surface. It calculates its horizontal and vertical coordinate, and the result is a full point cloud that represents the space, and it's accurate to within, every scan is accurate to within, depending on your scanner that you're using, within about 1 millimeter. So that's the information that it picked up from one single scan. And then you also go through a registration process where you stitch multiple scans together in order to capture the backside of walls and a space in its entirety. And you can really accurately and really quickly capture that site and bring it into your computer to work alongside you with your design. Let's see here. Here is the result of a scan. So this is a point cloud that we're flying through here in Autodesk Recap. You can see the immersive, the way that you can kind of just be within the site. And from Recap, you can measure, you can, identify critical areas that are important to your design. You can count even bolt patterns, and you can really be in the space. And it provides a way for you to avoid going back to the site and missing things because it's all right there. Within Recap, you can section through. It's a really easy to use tool software. If you guys are Autodesk users, I think you would find it really simple and easy to use. And then the great thing about Recap is the Recap file can be inserted as a link directly into Revit. And then you can basically model over top of the point cloud. We do have some specialized software that helps us model faster, things like pipes that can be automatically extracted, cylindrical objects. But then a lot of the model is actually just traced. And that's done by just cutting a lot of sections and being really careful with tracing over and accurately over the point cloud. As you can see there, the point cloud versus the final product in the model. Let's go to the next slide. Show you a couple, or maybe just one project example due to our time. Many of you may recognize this building, downtown Cincinnati, 4th and Vine. A lot of people know it as the PNC building. This was a really old building that they were doing some renovations to a few different floors, and they didn't have accurate plans. They felt like they didn't have accurate plans. Obviously, built in 1913, what documentation that you have there is going to be really old. And as we found, they were pretty outdated. You can see here the scan. We scanned the exterior, and then we scanned the 4th, 16th, 19th, and 18th floor specifically. And those were all tied together through a stairwell. And then we put that on a survey controller. We aligned that to their existing Revit model to some columns. When it's aligned to their columns, it comes in generally to the correct location. You can insert the point cloud via shared coordinates directly into the Revit model. So here you can see the cloud on top of their Revit model. You can see that the floor elevations actually aligned really well, which was somewhat surprising. But we did find some major issues. There was a sky bridge over the road that connected to the building that you can see there on the left. The left side is where the bridge is kind of coming into the building. And we measured that was off over 3 feet, 3 feet 9 inches about. So that had a major impact on their design, and they were really glad that we found that error because it saved them a lot of time and headache. And then the same on the right, there were just issues with where the modeled window was, where the design window was, and where it ended up being. We found a lot of these all throughout the space. As you can see, that's about 1.5 feet off, and that has an effect when you're trying to draw and design for partitions and bathrooms, and you're trying to fit within a space and meet your codes and everything. You want to know these discrepancies, and those were pretty large discrepancies, and we see that all the time on older buildings. So that's the only one, just due to time, that's the only project I had for you. I do have, let's see if I can get out of here. Just with the remaining time that I have, I kind of wanted to show you a project that we recently did. This is actually a project in Columbus that we did a couple of months ago, and it is an old school. It's called Starling School, and they are turning this into some type of housing, low-income housing, I believe. It's a historic school. They had some kind of grant to renovate the school portion, or this portion of the building. This portion is being demolished. So we went in and scanned it. They didn't have accurate plans or any kind of accurate documentation, and we scanned the entire building inside and out, and including above ceiling in some areas, and the attic to capture the roof. So there you can see all the way through the building. So a fairly complex building because there were a couple of different additions. The floor heights are sort of all over the place, and that's a very difficult thing to measure in the field. But we were able to, go into school within about 3 days. We captured the entire building, and then registered it, and then we also turned that into if I can pull it up. We turned that into a Revit model. As I said before, that point cloud can be brought right into Revit, and then basically reverse engineered, if you will. So there you have the two stacked on top of each other. And here is sort of the final product, which is sort of the launching point for our client in this case. It gives them a really great base model and something they can trust to start their design. Really accurate floor plans, really accurate floor heights, floor elevations, and then obviously structure is also part of that. So with that, I don't know how I'm doing on time. I may have some extra time, and I would like to open that up to anybody who may have questions.
Yeah, we have a question here. Go ahead.
That's awesome.
Yeah, hi. So it's been a while, but I've used a point cloud model to translate that into a Revit model. And I'm curious with this process, how you go about approximating, the level of detail that's shown in the point cloud model when translating that, say, into a wall that square on one end, but not on the other, and might not necessarily be plumb. Do you take like an average, or how do you get to what was shown in that floor plan you presented?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's something that comes up a lot. A lot of times we need to have that conversation with our client because every project can be a little bit different. Sometimes they want to show the true condition of the wall. If it is crooked, they really want to show it as being not parallel, perpendicular. But in most cases, I would say 95% of our projects, we try to keep modeled elements perpendicular and plumb to within reason. We state level of accuracy in our proposal. If something gets outside of, whatever tolerance is stated or discussed, then, the wall would maybe need to be broken, or maybe we talk about representing how we want to represent that. And then as far as detail, that's also a conversation, that the scanner is only picking up what it can see. So I don't know the way that the wall is built. I don't know the internal components of the wall or whatever it is that we're modeling. All I see is the surface. So typically we are just modeling at sort of an LOD 200 level, which means that we are not representing systems, wall systems, or even mechanical systems. We are just sort of modeling the geometry or basic. As you can see here, we have just a basic roof or a basic generic walls with a thickness to them that are properly dimensioned. And we can take that to, we can model simple holes in the wall for doorways, or we can put in a door with the correct swing, or we can, put in the door with all the trim and the skylights and all the detail within a door. That's just part of the conversation and what you need and what would bring the most value to your project. Hopefully that answers your.
Yep. Looks like we have two more questions and I want to move on. One of which here is asked, kind of what is the approximate turnaround time you said about 3 days to scan this building full inside and out, and the turnaround time to kind of produce a model at this level? I know that's kind of hard to answer, it's per project, yep. But it's about
it depends. It depends. I think this one may have taken. So we were in the building for 3 days, and we just had one guy in this case, which we could attack this in 1 day if we needed to. But in this case, we had one guy. I believe he was in there for 3 days, and then that comes back to the office, the raw data, and it gets registered. That usually takes about a day or two. And then the model in this case is within, depending how many resources we have to put on it, between 1 and 2 weeks to turn around the model after the point cloud is delivered. So all in all, you're probably, between 3.5 3 to 3.5 weeks, I would say.
Okay, and I'm sure a lot of that too comes down to how much detail you need, as the previous question asked, how much detail to build something. Awesome, thank you.
Absolutely.
Then we did have one other question in the chat. Are you using any of the portable kind of backpack mounted scanners that use the SLAM and LiDAR? Mentioning that they're not as accurate as true laser scanning, but the cloud is kind of stitched together as you walk around. Are you doing any of that?
Yeah, we have used the BLK to go and some others, but in general, we have found a lot of issues with those devices, and I know they've come a long way, and it's something that we're going to be looking into again shortly. But the accuracy is really low there, and it's not very dependable. And we find that if you make a mistake in the field and you bring that data back, you don't realize that you made the mistake until you're all the way back from the site and you're processing it. The laser scanning is, we use RTC 360s. We have a whole fleet of RTCs, which are really, really fast and reliable. So we've kind of stayed in our comfort zone there with the terrestrial, tripod-based scanners for the most part.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Jared. That's great. Keeping on time, if we have some more time at the end, we will open it up for questions again. I also will have a slide with all the contact information, and I will send that out to everybody. That way, if this did pique your interest in something you're interested in, we will get you the contact for each of these people. That way you can reach out with some more information. But with that being said, let's go ahead and transition over to Phil to talk about Enscape.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Oh, great. You guys can hear me as well. Good. So let's talk about really, it's not so much about real-time rendering, but it's also about just increasing understanding and helping people to have confidence during the design process that what they are imagining is actually going to happen. And I've been working with the Enscape team coming up, 6 years or so from the very beginning. I reached out to Thomas, who was the CEO at the time, and was just blown away by what they had put together. And I think the challenge for rendering, we've always done it. I remember sleeping under my desk in order to create renderings, because if for some reason the computer crashed, you had to start again. And what Enscape has done, I think they've really just set the bar. They've really raised the standard with regard to rendering, because it's real time in real time. So why is that important? I think Revit is incredibly valuable. We're seeing that the previous presentation, having models is just essential for a base level understanding of a design and a design process. And I think what you get from Revit in those terms is a lot of analytic information. You get plans, sections, elevations scheduled. This is a hidden line perspective of a project that I use for demonstrating and training people on how to use Enscape with best practices. If you go to the Enscape gallery, you'll see there's a multitude of very large and complex and beautifully detailed projects. This is a project that's evolved over the past 5 or 6 years as customers ask questions. I build new pieces. So this is our hidden line perspective, and it gives a certain level of understanding. We can create a realistic view in Revit that gives us another level of understanding, but that realistic view lacks a lot of emotional detail. So I think what we're trying to accomplish with real-time rendering is giving the design team and everyone involved, contractor, owner, even even yourself, you're trying to understand not only the analytic information about the model, but the emotional quality of the model. In other words, what is it, where is it, how many are there, how much is it going to cost? But I also want to understand, how's it going to make me feel? And that's where we're at in the architectural process. I really think this is a big historic transition. So this is the level of detail that we can get to in Revit in a realistic view without pushing the button to render and then waiting. I think the hard thing with technology is that if you create a technology that does something, it really doesn't do something. It really depends on people and their understanding and their knowledge. So one of the beautiful things about Enscape is that it simply works by leveraging what you've already done. And it works with Revit and SketchUp and Rhino and ArchiCAD and Vectorworks. The Mac beta has been announced, and I expect the Mac version will be available in the in Q2 of 2022. So in order for Enscape, or in order for design technologies to be really embraced, they have to be really easy to use. And that's one of the beautiful things about Enscape, is if you've already gone through the process of learning how to use your design application, you really don't have to go much further, because it's simply leveraging what you've already done in the design tool. So with regard to Enscape, it's a plugin. It actually works side by side. It works inside of Revit, and there's a button that says Start, and you click that button. And what Enscape's going to do is take that project in its entirety and go right through the graphic card, and then render that environment with real-time materials, real-time reflections, real-time animations if you have animated textures. This project's going to take about 15, 20 seconds to open. A really large project might take 30 seconds or a minute to open. And then you're going to be able to navigate and fully explore that project, changing the time of day, changing the time of year, and really explore that project as if you're in first person mode. So I'm just going to navigate to a point. I'll go ahead and turn on I'm just going to move the time of day here and help you understand that you're really seeing the information in a very, very emotional way. And I'm just going to keep going and changing the time of day until the sun actually goes down. So what Enscape is doing is it's just taking what we've already put into Revit and then allowing us to visualize that to an emotional level of detail, either on the desktop, on the web, even in VR. So it's very, very easy to use. It's also very fast. And so I'd like to just illustrate that right now. You know, the design process is one of iteration. Things never stop moving. We're looking at options, and it's really important to be able to see those options and see those changes in real time. So if we want to change the geometry of something or the material of something, the way we change it in Enscape is actually to go back to the design tool and make the change there. So I've just selected this floor, and I'm going to do something that's very familiar in Revit, and that is just go into the type parameters and change the material of this floor. So it's going to open up the material editor, and let's just choose a different flooring type, just a different floor material, and then select OK. And then I'm going to go back to Enscape for a moment just to let you see what's here. And then we're going to go back to Revit and complete this command and say OK. And then by the time that's done, this is going to update in just a moment. So that floor is updated. It's updated in the model, which means it's updated in Enscape. And the level of detail here is can be really extraordinary. So I'm just going to bring the sun down just so we can start to see the reflections and the material finish in this floor. So you see that hot spot, and you're starting to see where the light is reflecting. And it's not just about the material or the color or the texture of the material. It's also about how that material reflects light. That's how something appears natural. And if it doesn't reflect the light in a very natural way, then it begins to look plastic. So it's very important that, you know, cloth have a cloth type texture, and, you know, wood has a texture where you can see the grain and you can see the light bouncing through that grain. So right away from the very beginning, it's very easy. You simply start it. It's fast. As you make changes, they update in real time. It's not expensive. Enscape is an annual subscription, and the annual subscription for a network license is about $800 a year. And I think it's the big benefit is that it's just really, really beautiful. So Enscape, the two really critical pieces that you need to think about when you're working inside of Revit. Number one is, how are your lights going to appear? Number two is, how your materials are going to appear. And lighting comes from two artifacts in Revit. One of those artifacts is the actual light object that is inside a lighting family. So I'm just going to jump over to Revit here and zoom in and open up one of these light families. All of your light categories in Revit, they have a light object inside them. And if we look at this in 3D, we can actually see the light object. That light object that is native to Revit families is what illuminates inside of Enscape. So that's all that you need. They're going to work automatically. So if we go back to Enscape and change the time of day, the reason this light appears to illuminate is because of the light family, the light object that's inside of the family. The other illumination artifact that's native to Revit is self-illumination, and that's self-illumination of material. So the little wire that's inside this light bulb, that has a material applied to it that's also self-illuminated. Things like reveals, accent lighting, TV screens, computer monitors, all of those effects are created by selecting the material and giving the material a subtle amount of self-illumination. And that gives you, just those two artifacts alone gives you an entire universe of lighting, okay? It's just the illumination of the geometry or a light object. That's number one. Number two is the material. It's really important that your material not only have the appropriate kind of photographic texture, but you want to have the appropriate bump map, displacement maps, grit, grain, so that the light doesn't bounce off of the geometry in a very, plastic looking, perfect, smooth way. So if you have a wood floor and you don't have that wood grain in there, it's not going to look natural, and then it's kind of distracting. And you don't have to do this stuff at the beginning. At the beginning of the design, you don't have time to put all the lights in and all the materials in, but as the design develops, it's all there. The third thing that I want to illustrate is the importance of Revit to maintain that analytic truth and yet push that information over to Enscape in a way that can create this sort of emotional quality and maintain the coordination between the two. So I'm going to turn the lights up here in this model, and I'm just going to back out. One of the issues that we have in Revit is over modeling geometry. And that can really give your models a lot of trouble. And early on, we don't really know exactly what that component might be. We just know that we need a chair, we need a table, we need a piece of furniture. And later on, we're going to decide exactly what that might be in order to create the emotional level of detail. And we can actually create this kind of, we can simulate this kind of environment inside of Enscape. Enscape has an asset library with an enormity of beautiful furniture and office entourage and people and cars. But when you're inside of Revit and you just want to place a piece of furniture, I'm just going to place a chair here. This is just a simple task office chair. And this task chair is sufficient for where is it, what is it, how many do we have, what level it is on. We know how it's going to schedule. The task chair looks fantastic with regard to, that's all it needs to be from an analytic standpoint: plan, sections, elevation, schedules. Now, Enscape has beautiful assets as well. I'm just going to open up the asset library and do a quick keyword search for furniture or chairs. And I'm going to select an office chair here. And then what you can actually do is make an association between your Enscape asset and your Revit family so that they're continually coordinated. And there's a particular chair that I really like because of the details. So I'm just scrolling down here and trying to find it. And it's this one. So I'm going to place this office chair in the project. Now, Enscape assets are actually not modeled natively in Revit. They're modeled in Blender. They're modeled to a very high level of detail. And I'm just going to place this chair here in plan. And I think right away you can see the challenge is that this Revit component is perfect from the standpoint of its plan, sections, elevations. This Enscape asset, it looks amazing, but I mean, this is just down to the grit, grain, and the texture of the leather. But from an analytic standpoint, it's really going to clutter the Revit file. And Enscape assets also, when they're making these components in Blender, they don't know what category to put them on. They don't know which orientation. They don't know where the origin is, but they're beautiful. So here's what you can do to save you a lot of time and aggravation, where you can keep that beautiful Revit native family and link it to your Enscape asset so that it's always coordinated. And the way to do that is there is another option when you're in the Enscape asset library down here at the lower right-hand corner. It says link Revit family to asset. And I'm going to select this option and do a quick keyword search for this task chair and select it and select OK. What that does is it very quickly, I mean, you can't even see how fast it happens. It opens a family, it builds the parameter data from the Enscape asset and associates it to the Revit family. So when we select this component here and we go into the type properties, Enscape has added this asset information to that component. And the result of this is that you still continue to see the Revit family in Revit, but now you see an Enscape asset inside of Enscape. And if you move or copy or make another instance of this chair, so I'm just going to create another copy and place here and put one over here. here's the Enscape asset inside of Enscape. All right, so that's my presentation for you guys. If you want to go on a deeper dive, I'd be glad to do so with your teams. We can do a best practice webinar, please reach out. And that's essentially a quick overview of the value of Enscape and showing you a few techniques with regard to why lighting is important, why materials are important, and why linking Revit families to Enscape assets is important. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Phil. I would just like to say you should have heard the sounds coming out of the people in the room right now when you link those two assets together. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. Glad to do it. Thank you for letting me be part of this presentation today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Okay. Any questions for Phil?
Or we can wait till the end. I've got my my little finger is going on here, so I don't want to go over.
I think we got some time. We're actually running a little ahead of schedule, so this is great. So yeah, if there's any questions, feel free to ask them.
So can you do that with any asset? You can do it with trees, bushes.
Yes, you can do it with any asset. You can even do it with your custom assets. If you guys know Joseph Kim, I'm like, Joseph, we got to get better assets inside of Enscape. So he's taking SketchUp warehouse components and turning them into Enscape assets. I build a Revit family and link them, and then we put an animated texture inside the screen. You can take trees. I don't want a complicated tree inside of Revit. I just want a circle that's model lines on the ground with a little dash pattern for the drip edge, and then link it to an Enscape asset. The only thing you'll have to do is, in some cases, the Enscape asset team can't predict the orientation or the origin of the family, that whether or not it's going to match the one you've created. And you can't manipulate the origin and orientation of the Enscape asset. So you probably have to open your Revit family, possibly move it, possibly reorient it, and then they'll line up.
When you rotate an asset that's linked, though, does it rotate or does it stay in place and put, even if you rotate, like say if you rotated that chair?
Yeah, you're going to go back to Revit and you're going to hit your space bar, move the chair, and then when you go back to Enscape, it's going to be moved.
It's just
yeah, gotcha.
Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. We did get a question that come in through the chat asking if you could demonstrate the Enscape's material editor.
That's what I was.
Yeah, okay, and I'll be upfront about this. The material editor in Enscape, number one, it only works with Revit generic material types. So if you open the material editor and go, wait, where's all my Revit materials? If they're not generic material types, they're not going to show up. I'm just going to select material here, and this is the material texture for the big TV screen in the back. This one, it's really not, it's a TV screen, but it's got the marble painting on it. You see how it's illuminated? Well, that texture has illumination applied, and it has a material applied, and it has a little bit of bump. I just like that little bit of texture. But this is the material editor. Enscape also has a material library, but at the moment there are workflow issues around multi-user workflow. In my best practice is put all your custom materials in a folder at the top level where everyone can see them. And they haven't really thought this through with the Enscape material editor. So a lot of times if I want that Enscape material and I want other people to see them, I'm going to go and find that texture somewhere on my hard drive and take all of the pieces and parts of that texture and move it into my project custom texture folder.
Okay, awesome. Any other questions for Phil? Okay, awesome. Phil, thank you so much. If anybody has any questions, feel free to write in the chat and I'll read them as we get to the end. So with that, thanks again, Phil, and we will transition over to AP.
Yep.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Phil, if you wouldn't mind, stop sharing your screen and I'll kick it off on my side. Thank you, sir. All right. All right, just a spot check. Josh, am I coming through okay visually and audio? Good?
Yeah.
All right, awesome. Well, thanks everybody for the time today. We're gonna kind of keep this pretty fast and furious, I think, from my standpoint. I'm going to be going through Autodesk Construction Cloud, and if any of you guys had the chance to attend, AU a couple of weeks back, right? It's kind of a good time of year to level set, right? There's always a ton of things that come out this time of year, get announced, and specifically Autodesk Construction Cloud, I think is definitely the future from Autodesk perspective of the confluence of a project environment, essentially, right? We'll go into specific details along the way, obviously, but just in terms of core concepts that I think about when I think about our platform and where we're going, some of it pretty straightforward. Digitization has been happening for a long time. I think in the last 20 months or so, it's accelerated for obvious reasons, right? We're all kind of having to react to a new working environment. And I'm sure it's no news to anybody on this call, right? We're all kind of being tasked with, more activities, a faster pace of productivity. And oftentimes, right, we're struggling with staffing situations. It's a recurring theme that we're hearing from our customers. And, I think that's across the board in any industry. But another backdrop to this that we're really focused on is how do we really optimize a project environment moving forward, right? And a lot of times for me, coming from my background, that comes, really the main focal point is being more transparent, having a higher degree of connectivity amongst team members, amongst different companies coming together, and that's really a core fundamental piece of the construction cloud that we're focused on as well. This becomes a little bit of an eye chart, right? And I think to properly demonstrate, the entire platform, right, we're probably talking about, conversations into the hours and lengths, not maybe a 15-minute overview. But this kind of outlines a few of the pieces that really we think about in terms of the construction cloud. For the sake of today, we're really going to focus in on two main areas as far as this screen goes. That's going to be Autodesk BIM Collaborate. This is, if you can believe it, Autodesk renamed some products. This was formerly called BIM 360 Design, and the new platform is called BIM Collaborate Pro. And really that's built on top of Autodesk Docs as a project infrastructure. And we'll go into a few more specifics in the demo itself. But the main point of this piece of the platform is to enable design teams that are highly iterative, in many cases distributed across, different geographies, different offices, trying to get a better workflow in place for some of the model management, the version control, some of the communication practices that go on in a project. And again, it's really built on the backdrop idea that, we're trying to build out best practices. We're trying to, optimize over time and focus on continuous improvement, whether that's a project or whether that's really an internal company trying to solve some of those things. The platform can handle both, right? But as you guys look into, say, the build component, right, this really is a platform that's built to handle really any aspect of a project, right? Whether that's front-end design, Revit modeling, et cetera, or starting to get into more CA type motions or, project management type motions as well. So again, a lot to this. We're not going to cover it all today, but I'm gonna go through a pretty quick and dirty demo, if you will, of the main components of this platform. For some of you guys, you might already be using it. Others, this might be completely new. If anybody is a former BIM 360 user or even current BIM 360 user, this is essentially the next generation of that platform, right? So we'll jump into the demo component. I'm not a big PowerPoint guy, so we'll get into the specifics here. Josh, just a spot check. Can you guys see my screen? Should be Google Chrome at this point.
Yep, we got you.
Awesome, cool. All right, so just a couple basics, right, for everybody, just to kind of understand the mindset here. I am in a Google Chrome environment, right? I am signed into my account. I'm affiliated with a project. You guys can see at the top of the screen, this Blue Devil Residence Hall. And I'm in basically the project Autodesk Docs aspect, where all the files essentially would live for a project. Couple things just to point out, right? When I talk about the platform, we built this out in terms of specific modules that are really geared around specific functionality that's needed for maybe specific personas involved in a project, maybe specific workflows. The important thing to understand here is that the capabilities of the platform can be segmented out by persona. I, for example, am an admin. I have access to everything. That's not always the case, right? If we have someone that's maybe geared around Revit modeling specifically, not really involved in any construction type activities, right? They're probably only going to see maybe these top two, docs and design collaboration, potentially model coordination. If we're talking about some Clash workflows. The rest are more geared around construction and maybe project management type activities, but nonetheless, right, can be consolidated into one environment. And that again is part of the strategy. Autodesk is trying to limit the amount of times that people have to break off into different systems, and there's a certain amount of data loss that happens every time along the way there. Just for the sake of the demo today, right, I have a very basic data set that I'm going to walk through. This is again geared around a very highly iterative, Revit geared workflow that we see a lot of customers leveraging. Again, right now I'm in docs, and the first thing I like to point out, I have two folders that you guys will see on screen: active design models and shared models. Under this active design models, I basically built out this project to simulate, essentially all the different consultants that would be coming together for a specific project, right? Pretty generic breakdown, but it's important to understand that within this project, I'm providing a central location for everything to essentially live. And then I can segment out based on permissions along the way, who's going to have access to what in terms of the folder breakdown structure along the way. So when I start clicking into the project environment, say architecture, mechanical, you guys will start to see, potentially the work in progress files that are actually being cloud hosted. And what I mean by that is, essentially, instead of having my live active Revit model on my local server, my company, network infrastructure, I can essentially host that Revit model inside of Autodesk Construction Cloud and make it available to people to be able to open and edit, essentially, no matter where they are in the world. Essentially, this is a global infrastructure. So as long as they have Revit installed and the proper permissions to their specific folder, they can literally open up this file via the internet connection and make some edits along the way. That editing component, it's important to understand what happened directly in Revit, but it is also important to understand that there's a lot of personas, a lot of different individuals involved in a project that don't have Revit installed and still want to be able to, say, participate in the project. And by participate, I mean, essentially open up the model, maybe do some light viewing, no editing, right, from this Chrome environment, but essentially start, viewing the model and walking through it essentially on the fly. Here we go for a live demo. We kind of joked about this before the call. The viewer is not loading up, right? But essentially, when the viewer would load up, we'd be looking at the 3D environment of this Revit model. Let's see if I can get this to hike back up 1 second. Where I'd be able to actually walk through the space of the model. I'd be able to understand the sheets and 3D context of that model. And just using the up, down, left, right on my keypad, be able to essentially, walk through and understand the spatial constraints, understand how essentially the different systems would be coming together. And it doesn't look like it's going to help me out today here on the fly, so I'll just close out of this viewer. I have another example we can jump to that will show that large model viewer. But essentially, with this folder breakdown structure, I have my Revit models hosted. Every team or company could essentially plug into this environment, host their models, work on them. And it's also going to track the versions of these models and provide a project infrastructure that allows for the sharing of information a lot easier. So a lot of my time used to be spent, say, uploading a version of my architectural model to an FTP site, downloading the rest of the consultant's work, relinking everything, and making sure everything was accurate to hold design reviews or potential coordination reviews. Essentially, a lot of that work is kind of being done in the backdrop if the project is using this infrastructure. So I'll point out again some of the folders I have here, and then I'm going to jump over to this design collaboration module. And I already have that launched, right? But it's important to understand that, in this module that is design collaboration, now I'm starting to look at the project in a slightly different visual setting. I have swim lanes that represent each of those same disciplines, right? If I hop back to docs, it's an exact 1-to-1 in terms of the folders and what's represented on these swim lanes. And based on these nodes occupying my project timeline, I can start to understand, what teams have updated versions of their model and essentially shared it out to the extended team. So again, in the past, this used to be a lot of uploading, downloading, a lot of time spent on, just moving these large models around. Essentially, the system can automate a lot of that work, right? And one of the real benefits of this is not only being able to say, understand the update cycle, but take it in a step further, actually diving into the specifics of those updates, right? So I can click in on any of these nodes, say architecture that was shared, roughly a month ago, November 10th. I can click in on that and actually explore the scope of that model, right? And this will launch open the 3D viewer that, it seems like I'm still unfortunately having some issues with. But nonetheless, along the way, right, from a Revit standpoint, I can start understanding, and here we go, I got a sheet to load. I can start understanding the scope of that share, the state of the model, whether it's 3D or 2D, really the system does not care. I can define in Revit whatever I want to push out. So if I'm trending towards a milestone, right, I can share the appropriate sheets and provide an environment that, essentially the team can start self-serving some of that, viewing of most current information across the project ecosystem, regardless of the discipline, right? You can click in on the, say, electrical set and be able to view the scope of their latest and greatest, right? The nice thing about this is I can take this a step further, right? Because all of the data is being self-contained in the cloud environment, it allows me to wrap some more advanced functionality around this that enables the workflow, and specifically the ability to compare versions of these models, right? So if I wanted to compare, the version of architecture from November 10th versus maybe the last time architecture shared that model going back to October, let's say I'm a mechanical designer, right? I want to understand what implications might be affected of my disciplines. Essentially going into this compare allows me to select those versions of the models and essentially show those changes, right? And I'll launch open a viewer that I've already got these showing in terms of the change visualization. And you guys will see, right, the model in terms of the architecture versions of the discipline is being colorized for me. And it's actually articulating what's been added, what's been removed, and I think most importantly, what's been modified in this environment, right? And this is dynamic as well, right? I didn't get to show you guys the viewer because it was getting hung up earlier, but nonetheless, you guys can see similar capability here. I can zoom in and out, I can start selecting on objects. The nice thing about this is I can actually start, visually understanding what changes have happened between those objects, right? So, version 6, latest and greatest of this architecture versus version 5. If I cycle back and forth, it's very slight, right? But you can see a small change in the geometry here. I think more importantly, if it's something more than just a geometry change, say a above head ceiling, compound ceiling being shifted. This is something our projects used to struggle with quite often when we talk about multidiscipline coordination. We'd be moving our corridors, our ceiling heights, our soffit designs pretty frequently, especially on the front end of a project. And for a mechanical designer to keep up with those and react appropriately can be very, very tricky. So providing an environment where, say, mechanical can just select in on objects and understand, okay, this this compound ceiling in the corridor shifted by 3 inches between versions, what impacts does that have for maybe our trunk line or, slow piping, all the trickle effect that the change management process has. Really we're just providing an avenue to get a lot more transparent about that change management. And again, be able to visually track some of those things in a project timeline type constraint, right? So it's very clear, okay, if I'm working off of 2-month-old mechanical, I probably need to request an update, right? The backdrop to the system is you can automate a lot of this sharing process as well along the way. So it makes it that much easier and less time consuming for, say, a BIM lead to manage along the way, right? So that's kind of the design collaboration piece. I'm going to shift gears slightly, and then I think we can open up for a few questions as well. Not only do I have the ability to provide this kind of timelined approach to the infrastructure, we can also wrap downstream workflows in terms of quality checks on top of this kind of version tracking and update cycle. And specifically what I mean by that is model coordination. I know for a lot of architects, even design engineers out there, they're not always involved in, say, like a clashing constructability review workflow, but a lot of times they are being asked to participate. And I think that's not going away. I think that as a general trend, it's happening more and more out there. The nice thing about this is because all of my versions are consolidated in one project environment, I can use the model coordination module, which will essentially build out, based on my models, a clash matrix that I can then, again, kind of same mindset, self-serve some of the quality checking by individual disciplines. And what I mean by that, right, is if I'm, say, an architect or maybe a plumbing designer, it's very easy for me to go into, the clash matrix, understand what models have been provided here. And if I cycle over one here, just for example, right, I have my plumbing coordination model. This is an overall 3D view. And as I cycle across, right, this is going to be plumbing versus electrical, or plumbing versus mechanical, or plumbing versus structural. Basically, we're breaking apart those disciplines by their updates, their latest and greatest, and providing an avenue for the system to automatically clash them together and the team to basically click in on those versions of the model to actually understand, the actual clash analysis. What the system's going to do, essentially, it's going to give me a hard clash based on the 3D views that I provided in my models and give me a loadout of those views with a color visualization of, essentially it's going to look like green versus red. It looks like the system's hanging up. I'm not sure if it's because of the Zoom meeting or what, but when these models load up, it will look something to the tune of, what I have in Navisworks. And this is kind of a core piece that I think is important to understand about, even using our Autodesk Construction Cloud as a whole, is that when I'm tracking, say, action items, like the clashes between specific systems, this Navisworks model is being opened directly from my my Autodesk Construction Cloud project, right? So I'm in the same project that I've been demoing from, and I've literally just opened, the plumbing versus electrical, the same clash matrix that I showed you guys on screen. And from here, right, I'm able to start flagging things as issues along the way. I think this kind of demos a little bit better once the cloud environment loads up, but nonetheless, I'm not going to show you guys a spinning wheel the whole time. Basically when that clash analysis loads up, if there's something that a team needs to act on, I have the ability to create an issue, right? And that's essentially what you guys are seeing on screen in terms of these push pins. They're essentially flagging of a task that can be assigned out to a specific person or company involved in the project. And that person is then, responsible for taking action to make the appropriate fix, right? I can click in on these. It's going to take me to the specific 3D view. It's going to show that it was created from. It's going to show me all of the attributes of the issue itself. if I'm in Revit on the side making these changes, I could close these out on the fly as well, right? And the whole point of this workflow, especially, using issues as a means to track activities in the project and the design process, the whole point of that is to ensure that over time, our projects are going to hit, very specific quality metrics and gear towards a mindset of continuous improvement, right? I can run reports out of the system. I can set up essentially dashboards in the project environment that will show me things like issue trending and assignment. I can set up a lot of different capability essentially on top of these workflows that enable the project team to get a better rate of closure and a greater level of transparency essentially to the ongoings of a project, right? And for what it's worth, guys, I know the web viewer was not loading up earlier, but it's important to understand that these push pins can be added by anyone, even directly on the Revit models. These issues will round trip directly into Revit as well. So as long as people have access to the proper location inside of the, say, docs project, they can pop into, say, the architectural model, load up the viewer, when it loads, and be able to flag issues right from this web viewer to maintain that same type of workflow. So yeah, that was pretty much the scope of what I wanted to go through today. For what it's worth, right? Apologies for some of the technical hangups in terms of the viewing, but hopefully you guys get the picture in terms of some of the 2D environment here. Let's see if the 3D might load from this environment as well. Yeah, that might be a good way of just kind of demoing that quickly. Again, all web-based, no Revit installed. If I'm a project executive, if I'm a project manager, I don't want to be in Revit. Conversely, Revit designers don't want people that don't know what they're doing inside a Revit model either. This provides a very flexible environment for people to start, looking through the space, walking the space, if you will. It's not going to be the photorealistic view that, say, Phil showed on the fly, but nonetheless, right, I think you can start understanding, some of the spatial constraints of things that, might not be adding up in terms of the design requirements or, specific quality issues. And that's really where, again, that ability to flag issues on the fly comes into play, right? You have the ability to actually go in and put a push pin on something that needs to actually change. So again, just geared around transparency and tracking of ongoings of a project. With that, Josh, I think I'll give a pause here. I think kind of move through that fairly quickly, but just try to give the audience a feel for the overall capability of the platform here from a design only standpoint. There's plenty more on the CA and PM side of things. But
thank you for that, AP. We do have a couple questions. The first one is, how do you request updates from consultants, or rather, if it is it only published models that are visible in design collaboration?
Yeah, good question. So right now, the best way to kind of request an update, right? So if you're set up in this environment, you're kind of seeing that someone hasn't, essentially updated their model for a while. A couple ways to do that, right? You could just create an issue, right, and assign it to that company of saying, hey, provide us an update of your model. I got to be honest with you, more commonly, we see companies coming together, and this is something that is part of my role. It's part of our customer success team's role. If there's a fit for a specific company where they think, wow, this does look like it'll provide a lot of value to the way we approach a project, we'll typically try to do this type of demo session where we go through a lot of capability, but also put in place some standard practices. And one of those is exactly what the question's asking of, like, what is the update cycle that's expected of the extended team? And then how do we potentially automate that, right? So one of the ways you can do that is, say, automating a weekly publish of a model over the weekend. And essentially the system will automatically query if there's any changes for, say, electrical week over week. You set a date and time, like a Saturday at 5 p.m., right? As long as there's one synchronization that reflects changes between the versions of models week over week, the system's going to automatically publish that model. And really the only action is to go in and create, a package share of that information, which takes less than 5 minutes, right? It takes 2 minutes. The whole point of that is, the system is trying to be flexible to the project needs, but we do see that type of activity of, say, like setting up and sharing a package. If the system's automatically publishing a model, we see a BIM lead for the project go in and do that across all of the disciplines, right? It's kind of understood that Monday morning, everybody's model is going to be pushed out. Those updates are going to be reflected, and that's just the standard operating cadence of the project. And really that methodology, in my experience, proves out to be the best way as a best practice, just because it removes any variables, right? People want to share more often, say daily, they can always do that. But at least you have that weekly cycle that is a pretty, tight cadence in terms of, getting the updates from the extended team. It's kind of a rambling answer. I didn't want to jump into the admin and confuse everybody on the fly there, Josh.
I did have just a slight clarification on that myself. The only way to get it to show here, you can't just schedule an automatic publish. You do have to then package that and create a package in order for it to show on this timeline, correct?
Yeah, correct. And really that's something we've gotten a lot of feedback on as teams have deployed this, right? I think the next step is to automate this kind of package sharing cadence, if that's the requirement of the project or the want of the customer. They are working on that capability. Right now, they built it so that, still the onus is up to the individual professionals involved, right? If people want to review, say version over version of their model, it does allow you to kind of do that last check, if you will. You create the package, you can do that last check, compare your changes, make sure the quality is there before actually sharing it out to the team. So they built it with that kind of methodology or that type of workflow in mind, right?
Okay, that makes sense. A couple more questions, 3 to be exact. Yeah. Do the issues only show up in BIM Collaborate and Navisworks, or will they show up in Revit as well? I'm assuming they mean Revit native.
Yeah, they will show up in Revit. I believe right now it's Revit 2020, 2021, and 2022 that they will round trip into. I just don't have Revit launched, unfortunately, on the fly here, but yeah, those will round trip the 3D push pin into the Revit 3D view. So that kind of, again, thinking about Autodesk broader strategy, we're trying to provide this kind of data management, communication management environment that is Autodesk Construction Cloud, but we're trying to feed the tasks down into the desktop tools, the authoring tools, so that the rate of closure, the workflow is a little bit more seamless, right? So that is there currently. And if you guys have those versions of Revit, right? If you go into like my updates, I think I already have these added in, but you'll see like issues add in for Revit 2020, right? That is there for you guys to install. And essentially when you launch Revit, right, it's just another tab on the toolbar. So.
Perfect, thank you for that. Similar vein question, are the push pin issues linked directly to objects, or are they tied to kind of spaces and rooms to where you could then create a graph on a dashboard showing how many issues are located per level, per room, per trade? Great question. That's actually an area that I've given a lot of my own personal feedback, right? So if I go into an issue, just for everyone's context, and this wasn't launching earlier, so I didn't really demo this extremely well. It's a good opportunity to do that. These issues, right? These are all customizable attributes, right? So you can
build this out as complex as you want, or you can keep it as simple as you want. So any of these fields are customizable. To answer the question directly, the push pin does not like tie to the object as a container yet. That's something they're working on. Right now, it is just a push pin to an object, and there's not really a lot of intelligence behind that yet. One of the components of the platform is to actually be able to segment individualized objects as, say, assets, right? So, to a timeline, you'll be able to click on the door, and then you'll be able to get the issue list of that specific asset, that's tied to that asset as a container, right? But on that mindset of the question, in terms of like, running reports maybe on specific locations or specific rooms, how many issues do I have affiliated with a specific space maybe? That's where we can start getting into the location breakdown structure of the project. And again, that's customizable, right? That it's a very easy export location breakdown structure, export out of Revit, upload into Autodesk Construction Cloud, and then you have your one-to-one matching in terms of room numbers, spaces, et cetera. And that's one way to achieve that today in terms of the segmenting out and reporting aspect. Hope that answers it.
Thank you. And then the last question we have, unless any more come in, and feel free to start typing any other questions in the chat for any of the presentations here now that we're coming up on the end time here. But the last question for UAP is, given Autodesk push towards cloud services, do you see them adding any of this to the standard AEC subscription, or will it remain an extra licensing fee?
Yeah, great clarifier there as well. Right now, in the current AEC collections offering that most customers fall into, right? If you're working in Revit, you probably have a collection. Right now, everyone that has a collection assigned to them has access to essentially the docs component of Autodesk Construction Cloud. Now, the Revit cloud work sharing aspect, right? The work in progress, live, active Revit models component does not fall under that service. But everything under this, like, cloud hosted project file type environment, you can statically upload Revit models if you want to and just view them, right? Same with AutoCAD files, same with, I think there's over 75 different file formats that Docs handles today. That level of just project data management is included with your current AEC collection subscription. So good clarifier. A good thing to understand is a lot of customers already have access to certain level of this capability that I went through today. A lot of times customers just are unaware or haven't tested enough to know what's what. And just as an open offer, Josh, I mean, that is literally my role at Autodesk, right? I do a lot of project focus discussions, a lot of information scaling. So if anybody wants to look at the specific ins and outs of what they might already have access to, I'm happy to raise my hand for that. So
sure, thank you for that. I know people here on my end are definitely interested in that. So thank you.
yeah, definitely.
Okay, awesome. Go ahead and stop sharing if you would. I'll share my screen just to get to our last. Great. All right, and then I just wanted to pull this up just with the contact information for each of the presenters today. So here's that information. Take a screenshot of this. I will send this out to everybody who logged in today. I'll send out the presentation and we'll get the recording out as well. But here's that information from each of these presenters. If you would like to reach out to them for more information, again, this is just kind of a snapshot, a preview into what they can offer and the tools that they can do. So hopefully there was a lot of interest from you all, and you can reach out to them individually to help them work further with you on any needs. But that's pretty much all we had. So I just wanted to thank each of you again, Jared, Phil, and AP, for spending that time with us. And please, we do have a few more minutes left here. You need to get going, that's fine, but feel free to chime in and ask some more questions. We can stick around for a few minutes and answer any other questions you have for any of them, if there's anything like that. Question for you, Phil, if possible. Can you demo the group place tool in Enscape?
Yeah, real quick. It's the ability to place a selection of elements without having to place them individually. I think for a most frequent use case is for things like people and planting. We don't want to, place a bunch of people individually, a bunch of trees individually. So the way you do this is you open up your asset library tool, and you'll see there's an option here to place a single asset. You can actually place them from within Enscape now. I'm really excited about this. Because I think in the near future, we will be able to place assets in VR, which gets into first-person design mode. Then we have this other option, multi-asset placement. So let's go to multi-asset placement and then go trees. And let's see, well, no, I'll just search for the tag here. Let's look for tags.
Hey, Phil, can you share?
Oh, yeah, gosh. Sorry. Let's go to here and then here and do that. So here we go. Okay, so the first thing I did a moment ago is I opened up the asset library. You guys should be able to see my screen now. And we're going to select a certain category, or you can select by tags. So we'll look up, we'll get some trees here, or we'll just look up planting. I don't want to make it too complicated and go, oh, I really like this one, and I like that one. I like this one, and maybe I like that one. And maybe we like this one. Okay, and then you can choose different scatter pattern types, right? So you have rectilinear patterns where you pick 2 points. You could also place them by, let me get away from that one and go, oh no, actually instead of that one, I want to place 2 points this way, and it'll place them. So you got a rectilinear shape, you got a circular shape, or the other option is your let's leave that one. And the third option is your little paint bucket tool. So you can actually pick surfaces. So you go, oh, I want to place them on this part of the site or this part of the site, and click. And what it's going to do is give you a density value. So we can decide how frequently we want them, less frequently or more frequently. You can use a regeneration tool to decide how they're placed. And then you confirm the placement and apply. And that's going to go back to Revit. It's going to place them. And then because they're in Revit, they're going to get visualized in Enscape. It's going to churn, download them, place them. So there you go.
Awesome. Thank you, Phil.
Yep. You're very welcome.
Jared, I had a question for you. You mentioned some automating of being able to extract items out of the scan data. Just out of curiosity, what do you use to do that? I know there's some third-party tools out there. Do you use specific third-party tools to do that? And I had experience with laser scanning 5 or 6 years ago and used some feature extraction tools, and they were kind of at the beginning stages. Could you speak a little bit about kind of how far that's come or how accurate some of that stuff is to feature extract, whether it's piping or duct or doors, walls, et cetera, from the scan data?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Piping is primarily the thing that we use auto extraction tools for. We use a program called Edgewise, which you may have heard of. Just because cylinders, a cylinder is a primitive shape that's easily extracted. A rectangle or geometry such as a wide flange beam is much more complicated to extract. Edgewise can extract beams. However, you have to have really good data on all sides. It really depends on the data that you have. A lot of times with duct, the scanner is placed below it, and you may have two sides of it and be missing some, the other side. So the auto extraction doesn't really work very good. So there's quite a bit of cleanup. It works really well for pipes. It works really good if you have great data for structure. And then other than Edgewise, there's some other programs that we use. There's actually a freeware that we use called Cloud Compare that we use to help build topo. And if somebody needs a mesh of a floor, like really accurate modeled mesh type of floor, we will use Cloud Compare to create a mesh. So yeah, there's some stuff out there. You just have to be aware of how the software is extracting it. And you can't be 100% confident in it. The auto extraction is going to make some mistakes. There's always going to be some cleanup that needs to be done. But yeah.
Awesome, thank you. There was another question for you, Jared. I know you touched on this briefly kind of during your presentation, but it says Revit assumes square corners in perfect construction, which doesn't happen in real life. How do you account for this stuff as out of square or plumb, which I think you mentioned earlier, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it basically said it comes down to what the client's request is, whether they want you to just go ahead and square that off or plumb it, or whether they want you to kind of model it a little bit more accurately. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And there's been, I'll give you a couple examples. We recently did one project where we were modeling the structure. They had just erected the structure for this building, and they needed an accurate model of where that structure was because they were trying to fit glass to it and have the glass pre-cut before it arrived to the site. So in that case, you don't want to model that perfect. You don't want to model it perpendicular and plumb. You want to model it exactly where it is in its measured state as accurately as you can. So in that case, we were using Edgewise, the extraction tool, to extract the steel to give them something that was very accurate, that they could cut their glass pieces and have confidence that it would fit when it arrived. But a lot of times with interior partitions and just general geometry of a building that's intended to be square, a lot of times walls have a little bit more tolerance, we realize. So we will try to keep those things square and plumb and perpendicular just for the ease of use on the end use for the client, and for us really to have a well-connected model. Because as you guys know, in building models, we've probably all seen Revit models that are not good, not well built, that have a lot of triangulation and tessellation to them. Things don't connect and trim well. When things are not perfect and plumb. So we do make an effort where we are within our tolerance to try to keep things square, if you will.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so I know we're coming up on the time. I didn't see any more questions come through the chat. So again, I would just like to thank you, Jared, Phil, and AP for spending your time with us. I really hope that you pique the interest from some of the members, and then you get some inquiries here over the next couple of days. So again, everybody that joined, I'll make sure I send out the contact information for each of these individuals, and we'll make sure we get you that information. And thank you again for everything you shared. It's really great stuff. Learned about some new things, even though we use some of those tools. We use Enscape personally, and I did not know that you could do that asset linking. And AP, we used, BIM 360 pretty heavily. It's nice to see what's coming down the pipeline there. So we really appreciate that. And thanks again. And maybe we'll get you back in here to talk about some more stuff here soon.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate the time.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, guys.